We are now going to move on to our next presenter, which is Stephen Sundquist. Stephen has over 25 years of experience in clinical research and health programs leadership. His clinical research expertise in CRO and pharma sponsor setting centers on the conduct of phase 1 to 3B drug, biologic, and device trials for a wide range of therapeutic areas. In his role as Executive Director for the Canadian Cancer Clinical Trials Network, 3CTN, Stephen has been responsible for leading network initiatives designed to optimize the capacity of participating cancer centers towards improving equitable access to academic cancer clinical trials for patients across the country. Welcome, Stephen.
Thanks, Mary.
You're so welcome.
So some level setting, I think, for everyone on this in this session. We focus, again, as I said, in 3CTN on specifically in cancer clinical trials and supporting academic trials. But just to back up a bit and look at interventional clinical trials and the different types or objectives that can be covered in a clinical trial that can investigate aspects of disease prevention, looking at the impacts of medicines or vaccines, lifestyle changes, and other aspects on disease occurrence and incidence rates, as well as screening or diagnostic methods, novel methodologies or technologies or targets, screening targets or diagnostics, impacts on quality of life, survivorship following an intervention or treatment. They can be epidemiological studies looking at causal factors and connections between patient populations and outcomes, as well as therapeutic or treatment trials, most commonly understood by most people, I would say, in terms of the types of or what their understanding of trials are, whether they're drug trials or interventional drug trials or novel devices or new surgical or radiological interventions. I wanted to take a moment and just talk a little bit about what is often a therapy what is known as the therapeutic misconception. It is quite common in people's understanding and patients' understanding of trials, particularly when it's presented to patients initially. Hopefully that percentage of people who have investigated trials or have trials discussed with them increases from what we just heard here in Canada. But there's often a misunderstanding in terms from the patient's perspective and a misunderstanding of the trial's research objectives versus the therapeutic intent, and that being the patient's, of course, the patient's predominant point of interest, but really separating what that realistic expected therapeutic benefit is from a clinical trial versus an understanding of what the research priorities are and the science behind the trial's objectives are. And so that can be a risk when there's limited options, particularly for patients, when the trial is presented to them, if there's a late stage diagnosis or if other therapeutic treatment options have been already explored. So in order to try to mitigate that, the focus in presenting a trial to patients and in the informed consent process and in other conversations is making sure that there's a clear presentation of what the objectives of the clinical trial and the research question are, what the procedures involved in the trial will be, discussion and a weighting of the risks and benefits involved, as well as a clear expectation and understanding of what the likelihood or probability of receiving the treatment versus the control, whether that's standard of care or another control involved in the research study. There's also therapeutic misestimation, which is an underestimation of the risks potentially or an overestimation of the benefits that can be expected reasonably from participating in the trial. And again, that can be mitigated or needs to be controlled through a clear presentation of what the likelihood or probability of those outcomes, whether they're risks or benefits involved in the trial. And you'll see the informed consent process come up again and again as being central to ensuring that among other objectives, that patients have a clear understanding of that when they're considering a trial option or having that presented to them for the first time. 3CTN focuses on academic sponsored trials, and I think it's important to present and perhaps clarify the difference. Industry sponsored trials are pharma trials or device manufacturer or biologic manufacturer sponsored trials funded by industry. Academic trials are funded by the academic institutions, research institutes or universities, or collaborative research groups like CCTG, which Dr. Sohn mentioned in her presentation, and others. The intent is to advance scientific or medical knowledge independent of commercial interests, and they often focus on the advancement or optimization of existing therapies or changes in clinical practice. For example, testing combination therapies, adjuvant therapies, new regimens, or investigate additional indications for existing treatments. So that's really the space that 3CTN occupies. And who are we? And an orientation for you in terms of who is 3CTN and providing you an overview of what our network is made, who makes up our network and what we do. Our network is comprised of 43 adult and 14 pediatric centers located across Canada. Our lead investigators and clinical trialists and trial professionals make up the teams at those cancer centers. We have a central small but mighty coordinating center based here in Toronto that organizes and manages the conduct of our network. And central to 3CTN is a shared operating model. We have a common strategic plan and objectives and performance targets that aim to increase patient recruitment and availability of academic trials across Canada for patients, cancer patients. We also seek to improve the efficiency and the performance of aspects of clinical trials, making sure that they are conducted quickly, they're open quickly, their approval process is done efficiently, and that there's the highest standards of quality and regulatory compliance in the conduct of those trials. We have specific targets that our sites take up in common milestones and that they work towards to improve those aspects of trial conduct. Central to our strategy is a maintenance of our academic cancer clinical trial portfolio. That's what ACCT, the acronym, stands for here. We maintain a comprehensive portfolio of academic, multi-center, peer-reviewed trials, scientifically peer-reviewed trials that are of high quality, that will benefit or stand to benefit patients in advanced science. That portfolio, we disseminate and make available and share awareness of those trials across our network so that as many investigators and trial centers will open those trials as possible. That's our goal, to make those widely available for patients. We also provide our sites, our researchers, with some best practice resources, education, standard training, access to training, standard operating procedures, and novel processes and best practice tools for them to conduct trials as best and as effectively as they can. What many people don't realize is that centers rely very much on collaborative support to be able to do what they do. Trial units within cancer centers can be quite small and rely on partnerships or affiliations with larger centers and networks like ours in order to conduct trials. All of our strategic plan and all of our decisions that we make are overseen by our governance committee at 3CTN. Sorry, I'm just having some problems with There we go. Several governance committees that provide scientific and strategic oversight collectively to the work that we do help us set our strategic plan and monitor our performance and advise on changes in direction as required. We offer and provide full transparency and accountability to our funders. We have a unique funding model where provinces fund the Cancer Center trial units operations within the specific provinces. And then we have national level and foundation funders that provide performance incentives and accrual recruitment or accrual incentives for centers so that they can offset some of the cost to run the trial, which can be quite expensive, and provide those trials, select those trials and provide them to patients. We rely within our strategy, one of the cornerstones of our strategy too is patient and public involvement. We have patient partners within all of our governance committees advising our activities. We also have an expanded network of patients embedded within and are members of the individual cancer centers advising on trial conduct and promoting and advocating for trials locally. We communicate across this large network using many different modes. We have virtual rounds for our investigators at all our sites where they can promote and increase awareness of new trials that they are responsible for and promote their opening among other research institutes. We create a newsletter, a portfolio watch newsletter that we send out to all of our sites so that they are aware of new trials that come into the portfolio as soon as possible. And we provide supportive webinars on a regular basis for our researchers and professionals at our sites that help them keep abreast of changes in research standards, innovations that are being undertaken by centers and success stories, novel solutions to common challenges and other purposes. We provide those regularly, as well as regular meetings with all of our centers to evaluate, assess, and support them on progress towards their initiatives. We maintain a website. I encourage you to join that. I have a link in the deck, and I'll provide that to everyone, to Mary for everyone afterwards, where we actually are a hub of all of our information and access to information about each of our trial units, the trials that are undertaken or are active at each of our centers across the country, including melanoma trials. And like most networks, we function and thrive on collaboration with our partners in industry where there's common objectives, other research networks, as well as foundations, patient groups with common interests, including the Melanoma Network. A look at our network across Canada. We have network cancer centers and affiliated cancer centers. So affiliated cancer centers are smaller centers that are affiliated with the larger network centers, as well as a pediatric coordinating center for the pediatric network, and the pediatric centers in purple there you see across the map. So we're widely distributed across most provinces in Canada. Oh, and there's a list of all of our centers. Again, we'll provide this afterwards if you're interested. We have an objective, as I mentioned, for optimizing trial availability. There are currently over 700 trials in the 3CTN academic cancer trial portfolio. 185 of those are actively recruiting patients or active. And we promote through the methods I shared with you widespread opening of those trials as much as possible. Centers have a limited capacity for how many trials they can open and make a decision between academic and industry trials on an ongoing basis when our new trials are available. So we promote and incentivize the opening of these cancer practice changing academic trials. And currently the average is about over six trials available, our trial sites open for each of the trials in our portfolio on average. That's an increase since we started. We also promote patient recruitment through incentives to cancer centers. As I mentioned, last year, there were over 5,400 patients recruited or accrued to academic cancer trials across the 3CTN network, and that's an increase of 100%, almost on the nose, since 3CTN started in 2014. We also provide for our centers and maintain, based on the data that they report to us on a regular basis, metrics or performance measures for different aspects of trial quality and trial efficiency, as well as track accrual to each of the trials in the portfolio. And we can show that performance by center, by trial type, or by other indicated determinants or filters in an agile way. We have this very cool informatics tool that allows centers to see their own data. We transparently share that information across the network and work collaboratively with centers that may be struggling to meet targets in sharing the best practices or processes that have been used by other centers to help their performance improve. One area that we're continually working with our sites to improve upon is bringing the activation period for a trial down. It can be quite lengthy, and this might be a surprise to some here. The median time it takes for activation of a portfolio trial is 195 days. That is a decrease from the start of 3CTN, but it is still an ongoing priority for our network to bring that down, and we have some best practices in place and some tools, project tools, clinical project management tools and systems to help bring that down as well. We work with our external partners to improve on this as well, and with the help of the involvement of our sites rather. Research ethics board review of trials, new trials, which is required, has dropped significantly. It's now a median of 35 days, which is pretty much as quick as we could expect that process to be. So there's been significant gains in that area across the academic space in Canada. As well, to promote precision medicine trials and sites' ability to conduct those trials, 3CTN has promoted CEDARNet accreditation at our sites and have supported sites in doing so. Currently, we have 88% of the network with that capacity for tissue sampling and handling, and will therefore improve their eligibility for conducting many precision medicine trials that are opening, and an increased percentage of our portfolio, about almost 50% of the 3CTN portfolio involves some aspect of precision medicine. That's an increase. We've seen an increase in this capacity up by 25% since we started. So we're quite proud of that as well. As I mentioned, PPI, or patient public involvement, is central to everything that we do. We have a dedicated patient representative advisory committee that advises and guides our PPI strategy in all aspects of the network operations. And that local network of patient representatives and patient partners at our trial sites is continuing to grow. We have over 32 patient partners informing trial conduct across Canada at sites, which improves and really has helped shift the orientation of trial planning, trial conduct to be more patient-centered, thanks to our patient partners. We also provide an ability for that community of practice to network with each other, network with our other sites, so that they can provide support to each other and educational support and development as well. We also have this capacity now for promoting trial awareness and advocacy with the help of our network of patient partners and their contacts and their skill sets as well, which was an amazing realization as we developed this strategy. 3CTN provides resources for onboarding patient partners and implementing PPI for sites, and education materials for our patient partners in understanding and enabling them to be most effective in supporting trial. 3CTN's function is not to sponsor trials, really to help enable as a network the academic trials, but academic trial environment in Canada does face ongoing challenges. There continue to be regional variation in performance and priorities because of the nature of our healthcare system. Provinces have different shifting focus with regards to research and research funding. We're constantly working with provincial funders to ensure that trial center funding is prioritized and that there is an environment for conducting clinical trials that's maintained. We do also ensure that there is mentorship from our network members to those centers that require support, whether through turnover or transition of their staff or new onboarding of new investigators or clinical research professionals. So we're always trying to maintain the capacity for research in Canada. A focus of 3CTN, an increased focus going forward, is going to be to promote involvement in trials and work with communities that are underrepresented in trial populations so that the research outcomes can be more representable, and that everyone has an equitable access to trials. We have several initiatives to promote that. Specific groups that we are working within our network and with our partners to support increased involvement in trials are adolescents and young adults, the elderly patients, ethnic groups, and Indigenous communities. We continue to promote and are successful to some extent. There's always work to be done here in ensuring there's adequate and sustained core infrastructure funding for trial units at cancer centers. This is surprisingly something that we continue to lobby for. It's something that's nationally not provided. It's provided only through provincial funding. So again, that's a current focus of ours. And it recognizes that a healthy trial ecosystem and capacity are an essential part of the pathway for translational medicine and realizing outcomes for research. Supporting core competency development for our trialists and our researchers, and retention of clinical research staff at our centers is also something that we continue to try to promote and support through different means. And it's a critical importance, especially post-COVID. We've seen a lot of turnover in our research sites. We've gone about post-COVID mobilizing our network to promote a rapid response and have been successful in maintaining academic cancer trial patient recruitment overall as a country and new trial activation rates, and have restored that activity to pre-pandemic levels. There's variations, of course, by trial, by site, but overall we're back to where we were pre-pandemic. So that's actually a significant accomplishment we're quite proud of. We've also spearheaded and led the way for sites to adopt new processes for virtual trial conduct, patient consent, virtual visits and follow-up, as well as remote sponsor audits and monitoring. So again, we have that capacity as a network to change the landscape for how things are done quickly and disseminate practices to all of our centers that have proven successful. Most recent initiative that we've spearheaded has been CRAFT, which is an initiative to provide decentralized clinical trials. And that is really a mechanism for making a trial that's open and available at a site that may be prohibitively far away for a patient to consider, available closer to home at a local hospital or health unit or cancer center where that trial is not currently available. It's been about a 2-year process for 3CTN. We brought together stakeholders from government, from industry, recognizing that's a common interest and goal for industry as well, to make sure that trials are available. ethics boards, patient partners from across the country in our network, our investigators, researchers, and others who have put together a framework, and we've published this and have received some funding to support its launch at centers across Canada. And we have 3 of those proof of concept studies looking at the way of this novel way of presenting and running a trial that's led by a cancer center with a series of satellite sites in a node across Canada. A quick view of what that looks like. There is a picture here that shows the 3 proof of concept studies. There's one in BC, one in Prince George, BC, one centered in Sudbury, Ontario, and another one in St. John's, Newfoundland, each with 2 satellite sites. The satellite sites in question, in some cases, are community hospitals, and others are tertiary cancer centers. And the premise of the CRAFT hub and spoke trial cluster model is that it, on a trial-by-trial basis, uses a risk-based approach that's determined by the qualified investigator or lead investigator at the cancer center site and the trial sponsor for delegating specific activities for that trial to a satellite site where the patient is located. It leverages existing cancer care models and agreements and technology platforms so that they include trial activities. It has the potential to increase recruitment and feasibility for trials by including patients from outside of a cancer center's normal catchment area. We also developed with our network and partners a toolkit of resources, including template agreements that between centers that can make the startup and the activation of a satellite site as rapid as possible. But if you can see this as an example of expanded or scaled up to include any trial potentially, and the organization of the conduct of that trial would be determined on its own basis and based on a risk of the procedures involved, associated with the procedures involved in ensuring patient safety throughout. Then you add that or layer that over to the number of trials that are existing in Canada. With what we're seeking to do here is create the proof of concept that will be able to be shared and we'll publish with other centers that will show them again how this can be done most effectively. We'll tweak our toolkits so that and make that available to our network cancer centers and industry openly, so that again we can help promote a novel way of conducting and organizing centers so that patients have more equitable access regardless of where they call home. So that's the goal for CRAFT. More news to follow. Here's some information. I won't dwell on this, on the 3 centers and trials that are being undertaken as we speak this year as part of the proof of concept. And then lastly, but not least, I wanted to focus on another initiative that 3CTN has supported and co-led, and that is the clinical trial Navigator. And that's, you may, or various members here may, or people on the call may be aware of different trial finders. There's cancertrials.ca, which is supported by the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer, and that's made available on many patient or disease group sites, as well as by 3CTN. There are provincial trial finders, CTO, Clinical Trials Ontario, Onco Quebec in Quebec, and other provinces have trial listings. Melanoma Network has access on their website to trials as well. There's a myriad of options for finding trials, but often what we know are patients may express confusion about where to look, maybe questioning about, well, are the lists similar or derived from the same source? And With regards to academic trials, there may or may not be an accurate representation of the trial sites or where the trial is available. And then with some investigator-initiated trials, they may not be listed in common registries at all. So again, we're working towards improving that. But generally, to help clinicians, oncologists, and their patients with a service level support and a guided support for finding trial options that might be suitable for them, Windsor General Hospital launched the trial Navigator back in 2019 with 3CTN's financial and our site's support in development and funding. That started with an Ontario launch. We're looking at ways to scale that up nationally. Now, it is available to patients from across the country. This report will show sites available across the country as well, but the funding currently is provided only by Ontario. So just to look at on the 3CTN website, as well as Cancer Center websites, there are links to the Trials Navigator. This process begins with a patient or their physician completing and submitting a request form and a consent for the Clinical Trials Navigator to search for trial options related to their specific diagnoses. The clinician referral form will collect basic information from your provider or patient's provider about the disease and the current treatment therapeutic line, as well as specific requests for consideration of types of therapies or treatments to be looked for in the trial listings, as well as the therapeutic intent and disease type. Patients themselves will consent or provide a simple consent to allow the navigator to search available health information in helping match patients to suitable trial options. With that in place, the navigator has a very efficient process and searches through available trial listings and registries to identify trials. Also, that includes 3CTN's own portfolio of academic trials, and there's a reconciliation of active trial sites to ensure that, and vetting of those sites to ensure that the trials are still active as indicated in the registry at those sites. At the end, the patient and their doctor receive a report that lists the trials, as well as a navigator service can provide some support in understanding the different trial options that are presented to them. And essentially as a process, that's really all there is to it. Sorry, with that, I just wanted to thank you for your time. I wanted to acknowledge our funders and collaborators that support 3CTN. And if you wanted to learn more or have specific questions, you can always send us an email at the email shown, or visit our website. Thank you.